Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. So with season 2 of The Witcher coming out on December 17th, I have decided that I'm going to finally make Ciri's coat from season 1. Now, I've never actually read the books or played the video game. The gameplay looks very similar to Assassin's Creed or Uncharted, so I don't know the full storyline or what's coming up, but I am looking forward to seeing season 2 now that they're finally together, because that took forever for them to find each other. I was hoping more than, 2 minutes of screen time with them finding each other from season 1. So hopefully that improves quite a bit more in season 2. So getting back to the cloak. The screen accurate color of the cloak is a little bit more of like a tealish, like a dark blue tealish color. And I really don't look great in that kind of color. And so when I was researching this costume more, I came across this photo of it on a costume display, and the color is much more of like a darker royal blue. And that is a color that I do look good in. So instead of going with the more screen accurate color, because there's a lot of color grading in there, I've decided to go more with the darker royal blue, which just happened to be great because I think this is 5 meters of a wool rayon coating, and I think it's also 58 to 60 inches wide. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, so this is what I'm going to be using to make my Ciri cloak. So it has a really nice drape to it. It's really fluid. I don't think her original cloak was made out of wool, or it could just be a different type of wool. So the fabric I have though is a wool rayon blend, and I think it'll make a really nice cloak. I also have 5 meters of I think polyester matte lining fabric. Now, because this is a wool rayon, it cannot be washed, or I guess it could be hand washed, but I don't want to have to try and hand wash this with this hand right now. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be heavily steaming this to try and get any shrinking out, just in case in the future when I wash it, or if I wash it instead of dry cleaning it, it won't shrink at all. So that is what I'm going to get started on first. And then once this is all been steamed, I'm going to get started on the pattern of the cloak itself. Anyways, let's get started. Alright, so I have spent the last little while just kind of draping a pattern out on my half-scale mannequin. One thing I have discovered upon viewing close-ups of Ciri's cape is that the cape and the sleeves are all cut in one piece. There's no seam attaching the sleeves to the cape. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to make that, but I think I figured it out. It's not perfect. It's very, very rough. I like the back better than the front. So the back of this, it's essentially like a circle skirt or a half circle, and then the sleeve is cut in there as well. Also, her hood. I thought it was just like a plain hood. Rewatching it, I discovered that there's like a whole bunch of crazy pleating going on in the back of her hood. And so I talked to a friend of mine. She's like, well, just try creating like a dunce cap and then like pleating it in. So I tried that and it mostly worked. Now that I've kind of figured out the small scale version, I kind of have an idea of the shape that has to be, and I think it'll be much easier to create the larger pattern for this. But yeah, I'm so excited. The bishop sleeves, I think I'm going to have to make them bigger because the bishop sleeve in her cape is a bit more asymmetrical, so I'm going to be figuring that out as well. But I think it works, and I'm excited to get this onto my mannequin now. So it has been a couple weeks since I've been in the sewing room. My deadline for this project has very much come and gone. I just really haven't been feeling that well lately, so I haven't gotten that much done. Anyways, so this is my mock-up so far. The hood, I got it to work on the mini mannequin, I'm not liking how this is looking, so I'm kind of ignoring this right now, and I'm working on my large mock-up. Oh, I'll stand up, I guess. So overall, I'm happy with the mock-up. This sleeve will have the lining that'll pull it up a little bit, so the poof will be a little bit more prominent. Anyway, so that will be more poofy once the lining's in there, just to give it the right look. I think overall the shape is correct. Now, one thing I've had to add to mine is actually an underarm gusset. I just found there wasn't enough fabric under the arm for movement, so just by adding this little triangle in here, it's helped quite a bit with that. So I'm happy with this. So I don't think I'm even going to bother making a paper pattern for this one. I've been playing with the pattern in my head for like over a month or two now. I'm ready to just cut out the fabric and get onto the real thing. So the hood is very much still a disaster. It's just, it's one of those projects that I kind of want to throw in a corner. But I will persevere. I will get it done. I'm not going to get it done before the 17th, but I will get it done. And hopefully I get it done before the new year. Enough talking. It's time to rip apart that mock-up and cut out the real fabric. And then once that's done, I'll do something with the hood. All right, let's get to work. Now I get this question every time I use this technique, but to save time, I like to add mini magnets to the edge of my scissors as a guide for my seam allowance. It isn't perfect, but it makes it very quick when I do not feel like measuring out the seam allowance. And the other question I get is, where did I get these fabric weights? And the answer to that is, I made them myself from marble tile from the hardware store and vinyl. With everything cut out, it's time for the sewing to commence. Off camera, I added some interfacing to my shoulder pieces for a little more structure, and then I marked the exact seam allowance on them to make sure they came out beautifully. Once the shoulder dart was sewn, I cut the dart almost to the end so I could press it open flat on my tailor's ham. And after I'd finished sewing up the other side and the lining pieces, it was time to start putting together the body of the cloak. First, I lined up the top of the sleeves. And then stitch them together. Once that was done, I pressed the seams open nice and flat, and then pinned the shoulder pieces in place, taking great care to line everything up. And then stitched everything in place with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now before sewing up the bottom of the sleeve, I first pinned and stitched the gusset in place. With the gusset in, I then lined up the sides of the cloak and the bottom of the sleeve and stitched them together, stopping at the point of the gusset. And voila! An angel sleeve cloak! Moving on, it's time to now make the sleeve cuffs. So I made the bottom of the cuff just wide enough that I could fit my hand through, and it is 8.5 inches long, so it covers the majority of my forearm. For a nice crisp seam, I pressed the seam allowance open with copious amounts of steam, and then let it cool with a wooden clapper on top of the seam. I then repeated these steps for the opposite cuff and the lining. Setting the cuffs aside, it's time to finish up those bishop sleeves. Now, when I was first looking at Cirilla's cloak, I thought that maybe the sleeves could be box pleated in the bottom, but then I found this photo and it clearly shows that they are knife pleats. Now, my sleeves are 52 inches around the bottom, so I had a lot of pleating to do to get them to fit into my 16-inch cuff opening. I decided to machine baste the pleats in place before attaching them to the cuff because then I didn't have to worry about them possibly coming undone. Now, before I can finish off the sleeve, I first need to add the lining to keep the sleeve in place. But before I can do that, I need to finish off the center front opening of the cloak. With the center front of the coat finished, I then slipped the lining to the inside and pulled the lining through the sleeve. Now, I didn't actually show this, but the sleeve lining is more of a tube versus the angel sleeve shape, and this is to help keep the bishop sleeve in place. This actually was used quite often during the 1890s to help keep the sleeves poofy. With the lining stitched in place, I then attached the outer layer of the cuff to the sleeve to finish off the bottom of the bishop sleeve. Now, at this point, I am very happy I have an industrial machine because at some points of this sleeve, there were parts that were about ½ an inch thick. And once the cuff was sewn in place, off camera, I stitched the cuff lining over the raw edge for a nice clean finish on the inside. And now it is time for the cursed part of the project, the hood. Now, I won't lie, I was dreading this part. I went through like half a dozen different mock-ups and many hours of tweaking those mock-ups until I finally landed on something that gave me sort of a similar shape to the one in the show. Now, when it came to sewing the hood, first I sewed up about 3 or 4 inches of the center of the hood to kind of create the center of the rose, and then I opened up that seam and then stitched it along the top just to kind of create a little pocket. And then I just started pleating up the hood. Now, this process was semi-organic. I didn't really measure things, I just needed it to look nice, and I needed the pleats to line up at the top. So I just kind of took my time and played around with the fabric, and it was what it was. Now, once everything was pleated, I then pinned the top of the hood together and stitched it together off camera. So with the top pleats secured, I then needed to secure the rest of the pleats in place. So to do this, I added a plain hood lining to the pleated hood. And then I just kind of pinned the loose pleats to the hood to keep them from shifting around. And then once everything was pinned, I then tacked those pleats to the hood lining. And then I released a huge sigh of relief because the cursed hood was done. And finally, it is time to attach the cloak to the hood. Or the hood to the cloak, whatever you want to say. So first I clipped the hood to the outer fabric and then stitched that. And then I turned the cloak wrong side out and stitched the lining to the hood for a nice clean finish on the inside. I then added a fur hook and eye to the center front closure because the weight of the fabric needed something that wasn't going to break easily. And lastly, I finished the bottom of the cloak with a simple 1/2-inch hem. And welcome back to my sewing room. So I really love how this came out. Overall, I think the sleeves fit very well. They're very floofy. They are very comfortable. And they kept me so nice and warm while I was taking photos. I think it was like -6 out there with a wind chill of like -20. And my body was warm. My toes were frozen. But yeah, my body was definitely warm. And the cape hood is wonderful. Something I actually didn't show is I had issues with the cape hood falling off because of the pleats in the back. It is quite heavy. So something I didn't show is I added a comb into the cape hood, and when the cape hood is off you can't see it at all. It hides nicely, and then when I put it on I can just grab the comb, slide it into my hair, and this isn't going anywhere. So it is great for keeping the hood on my head. Yeah, I love how this turned out. So with my last outfit complete and my final video for 2021 coming to a close, I hope you all have a very happy new year, and I'll see you next year. Bye!
Bloopers!